Good afternoon, everyone. Right after the makhni dal and paneer, I know it's very hard to stay up, but embedded finance has woken up the banking industry. So come on, guys, we can do a better job of it. My panelists, 5 of them are men, of course, and I'm here to break the myth that it's all men's world, because women also belong there. I can see the women there grinning ear to ear. My name is Neha Mehta. I'm the founder of FemTech Partners, and as the name suggests, we amplify world's 50% point of view female in tech. I'm a lawyer by training, and I think one of the reasons why I was asked to do this panel is because very recently I published a book on super apps. And that's exactly what we're talking today, embedded finance. And my panelists here have variety of experience from different walks of life. So it's my job to make sure that I'm more exciting than your third cup of cappuccino. I was thinking of embedded finance, and it almost felt like it's going to be the Wi-Fi of the finance world, right? We don't see it, but the minute it's missing, we notice its absence because it's so important for us. From ride-hailing to where we have loans coming up, payment, and whatnot. So my book, One Stop, which is on super apps, talks about this embedded finance a great deal. So while I try to keep you up and make sure this session is not as boring as your last meeting, I have a quick question to the audience. I see people are getting into the room, and I hope I'm audible to the last person who just entered. Ooh, okay, cool. So if I were to ask you, what is the wildest thing that you can imagine in the embedded finance world that you have used lately, or you're planning to have that on your phone? Without even realizing it, we have been using embedded finance all our lives. And if you don't know what it means, don't worry. I've got the experts to answer that for you in a bit. But if you raise your hand, I'll make sure I give you a gift, which is going to be a signed copy of my book, not sponsored by the organizers. Anyone who has been using embedded finance and is kind of thinking this is the wildest thing they have used in the recent past? You can raise your hand, and I'll make sure that we can hear you. Maybe I'll turn to my panelist. What is the wildest embedded finance solution that you have used in the recent past? And don't be biased to your own product, okay? And the mics are here.
Okay, you really have, since I'm taking the first shot at it, I don't think I have a very brilliant or ecstatic answer, but I think it's ubiquitous. Payments has always led the way, I think, for some time now in this space. And it achieved fair degree of success and, embeddedness across domains, segments, apps, etc. The entire payment process is, the payment experience has been taken to a new order over the last many decades. And we've seen wins there every now and then, every year you see some improvement drawn in from either customer experience or driven more deductively from the use of technology. So that's ubiquitous. I think payments, embedded finance, that allows either that sort of facilitates payments or sort of helps, build on that. Insurance, I think, has seen some interesting sort of use cases. If you were to just sort of broadly take a broad sweep of domains, healthcare, travel, so on and so forth, I think there are ample number of cases where insurance has got embedded. So across every product and use cases and domains within that, I think there is ubiquity. I think that's great. It's grown. I think there is value that's seen in the space. And therefore you see the players across the spectrum entering this to solve for different use cases. So I probably have not answered your question, but I think in a different, I have sort of provided a slightly different take on that.
Let me answer this, if at all I'm getting the signed copy of the book.
No, Aditya, a first mover advantage.
And let me be a little biased towards where I come from. So the crazy piece that we've just launched is with one of the largest telecom provider who happen to be a payments bank as well. So up till now, and this is in transit, up till now, when you have a Metro card, since it's an offline transaction, you had to go to a kiosk to be able to write the balance on the card. What we have recently launched is the card can be tapped on your mobile phone, and you'll be able to see the balance of the card. At the same time, you'll be able to reload that card with the balance to be able to use in various transit platforms, such as metros or state transports, etc. I think that is one of the craziest things, and we are building around a lot of other functionalities, and I think this space is going to grow big.
Yeah, that's wild. And what's the app called? How do you scan it? Just by the QR code? Or?
So it's with the bank. I'm not permitted to maybe name
Sure.
the bank, but yeah.
Okay. So it's like a teaser. The movie is still yet to come.
It's a teaser, and it's the biggest, probably the telecom player. So you know who I'm talking about.
Sure. Okay, so I have, like I said, I'm the only woman, so I'm not going to dominate the conversation. I will let the man do the talking. On my extreme left is Aditya. He works with the Unity Small Finance Bank. I hope I got the name right. It took me a while to remember it. And my question to you is on financial inclusion. And the reason I ask this is because I largely work in this space using tech as a force of good. And you have this incredible wealth of experience. But when you look at embedded finance, how do you think it's reaching the last mile?
I think, as I said, there's been tremendous progress in this. And inclusion from, we think, I think there's a tendency to think of inclusion in terms of credit. But I think the simple fact of making a person's money accessible to him itself is a big solve these days. The fact that you have your money, you can store it securely, you can access it at will. That itself has seen a giant stride has been taken in that direction. And I'm talking about whether it's Aadhaar-enabled payments, if it is or it is through app-led payments, etc. Feature phone-based sort of access, UPI. So inclusion at the very first step that allows a person to access, their own money safely, securely, and at will. That's been the first step in driving, bringing people into the fold. Obviously, the next step that follows is usually credit. And that, again, if I were to take across segments, whether it's microfinance, whether it is merchant lending, supply chain, there has been the embedded component of it has grown across these streams, right? And there are several. It's now pretty much hygiene for most of us to sort of think of providing solutions in that order. I think that the challenge that remains is to sort of draw from customer experiences and pain points and continuously solve for them. And that is where, I think taking a cue out of the topic itself, turning every business into fintech, the collaboration between banks or NBFCs or banks and fintechs becomes inevitable because technology has to increasingly be looked at more, deductively and saying how do we use it to solve this problem, and look around the landscape and see, pick the best pieces for yourself and say, okay, this is what can help to solve problem A for this particular segment or this particular customer.
Thank you, Aditya. Bring forward 2 points which I was hoping to touch, partnerships and consent. And on the angle of partnerships, I would like my fellow Singaporean to talk about your platform and how it brings forward NBFCs, banks, because something I have to mention to you, while I was having lunch, everyone was talking about platform, right? That's the buzzword here. So why don't you demyth for us what exactly it is that you're working on?
Sure, thanks. So a lot of use cases that on embedded finance that we see obviously are, although they are pretty, they are hidden or ubiquitous. I think we all consume that on a daily basis. But if you're running a business or if you're running any kind of an outfit, what is also happening is this need to get finance for is obviously a very real need, and especially given the kind of SME or MSME funding gap that exists today in the market. And this is not just India, but we are talking about this globally. It obviously becomes that much more important, today to ensure that there are different channels through which these finances made available to these businesses. So what really the platform that you were referring to really is something that we've done And this is initiative by Reserve Bank of India. And Reserve Bank has formed a company called PSB Alliance, where all the public sector banks kind of come together. And they are trying to build utilities for different industries or different segments or different use cases. And one of the utilities that they're building is this whole supply chain ecosystem. And primarily what that does is 12 of the largest banks in the country come together. And on the other side, there are lots and lots of platforms who aggregate customers. And these customers are coming onto this platform asking for finance, right? So it could be let's say, software providers, accounting software providers. It could be ERPs. It could be let's say marketplaces which are specific to an industry. Let's say it could be construction industry. It could be pharma industry, and so on and so forth. Now these guys have let's say platforms of their own. And a lot of the large clients require working capital finance, and that's where they come onto this particular platform. And on the other side, you have a bunch of public sector banks now, but it's obviously opening up to other lenders as well. And these lenders then finance these different counterparties through these aggregators that I call them. So that's essentially what this platform does. So I mean, essentially what I'm really saying is that embedded finance is not just what you and I consume on a daily basis as a consumer retail customer, but it also spreads across businesses as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And on the aggregator side, I have Aiyappa, who is an expert in the space, and everyone knows him. We were going around, and everyone said hello to him. No one looked at me. So tell us what you do in the aggregation space, and we were briefly talking about the consent and the data privacy. Do you want to touch upon those topics as well for us?
Sure, thank you. I'm from Perfios Account Aggregation Services, popularly known in the market as the Anumati Account Aggregator, right? So embedded finance, as we were talking about, you touch upon it every day of your life. I mean, today, right from a bus aggregator service to airline tickets, at the checkbox, you can get an insurance. So difficult in the past, right? And as more and more companies start to embed finance in their services, people want to now understand how much finance can I give somebody? And how do you do that? You want to be able to have some underwriting data, right? Or some data to underwrite. So that's essentially where the account aggregator has started to play a role, right? When RBI thought this through from an account aggregation point of view, they said, okay, let's bring in consent as part or the bigger part of the data transfer. Everybody gives data, but we don't know where the data ends up at the end of the day. Nobody has accountability to that data as as a data consumer, right? So the idea was, okay, can I bring consent as part of this, and can which is primarily known as a consent manager, can they play a role, right?
Aiyappa, you mentioned something very nice. I'm so sorry I'm interrupting, but he said he's data blind. He's talking about all these data points, and you said you're data blind. Tell us about that as well.
Okay. So as a consent manager, my job is to manage the consent. And so what RBI said was, you manage the consent, but don't have access to the data, right? Once you have the consent, you transfer the data onto the people who want to use it and provide a service. But you shouldn't be able to see the data. And hence, we are data blind. We have no access to the data. We don't store the data. Everything is purged, right, as soon as the consent is given. And the idea is to bring transparency. We were talking earlier about Gen Zs and the new generations, and everybody wants to know what you're going to do with my data, right? And so data privacy is becoming big in India today. The DPDP Act is just out. And now it's about bringing in transparency and saying, okay, as a FIU or a financial information user, what exactly are you going to do with my data? And that's where the consent piece comes in, right? You're now telling your customer, this is why I want the data. I'm going to provide you this service, and this is the amount of data I'm going to collect, right? And this is how long I'm going to store it, all as per guidelines given by the RBI.
That's brilliant. So it sounds to me that embedded finance is like a Swiss knife. It has these multitude of features. You don't know what you need unless you chance upon it, and then you're like, wow, how was I living without it? And I see Jitin laughing here because he does something really sexy, and I'm not kidding when I say this. It's because he's in this healthcare space, and Aiyappa just spoke about Gen Z. I just got my one-on-one tutorial on what Gen Zs like to do these days with their money. I don't have that much money, but come on, tell us, how does it happen for Gen Zs, embedded finance, and in healthcare space? Give us those great examples.
Yeah, I think, thanks Neha for calling what we're doing as sexy, because I genuinely believe it is. And I think we talked about embedded finance, and by definition, if we were to take a step back, I think it works best when you need it. It works best when it is seamless and it becomes an extension without you knowing that it is very cumbersome. So healthcare, especially in India, is cumbersome. Healthcare, I continue to believe, is broken, and I think COVID has exposed it not only for India, but many other places across the globe, and therefore it requires solving. So access and affordability are extremely frictional subjects when it comes to healthcare in India, and we at SaveIN are trying to make that seamless. So when we talk about embedded finance, especially in healthcare, where more than 70% of expenses are borne out of pocket, I think it becomes a very natural fit for a candidate which is ripe for disruption with embedded finance, especially when the quantum of that industry is $100 billion in India. So I think what we do is we make it very convenient and easy for people to be able to pay for medical expenses which are otherwise not covered by health insurance. So you could have a 1 crore health insurance, but if you have to pay 1 lakh rupees to your dentist, I can bet that your insurance will not come to your rescue. And at that time, if you can get a solution which can make you pay for that particular treatment at the time of your choosing, on terms which are extremely and unbelievably nice and in your favor, which means people like us, we facilitate that at zero cost, which means you don't even have to pay any interest for the expense that you incur. That I believe is truly transformational. It allows people to access timely care without burning a hole in their pockets, without any down payment. So it can transform how people want to live, because if you are not healthy, probably you are wasting your time doing whatever you're doing. And I think that, to me, is the need of the hour. And if India has to become a 5 trillion, 10 trillion, 20 trillion economy, all of us in this room and outside have to be healthy. So I think that embedded feature, we are proud to be building that, taking it to masses. And that, I think, is something that is probably also the answer to the question number 1, where you were willing to give that sign thing. And I think, it's really novel, right? Because it hasn't existed in India for a while.
She did say you can't talk about yourself.
But I can be a little biased.
So, okay, we'll do it this way. I vote for that, so you can give me the
Looks
book.
like I'm giving away copies of my book.
Thank you,
now.
thank you,
It's
Aiyappa.
not fair. To everyone. Okay, let's see how many people are there in the room. But jokes apart, looks like embedded finance has become the Superman, right? Saving our day after day without taking any credit. And how can you have a conversation about embedded finance? How did you know this question comes to you?
Payments.
That's right, payments. So the guy on my left is the guru on payment space. At least he pretends to be. He's going to kick me after this. But tell us, how does it work, the India payment story?
I think the embedded finance actually started with embedded payments to start with, and I think everybody now uses it. Okay, let me probably also define, as you said, what is embedded finance. So a non-financial services company or institution or an app or a portal uses embedded financial services into its own journey is something which is embedded finance. Could be payments, could be banking, could be lending, could be insurance, could be healthcare, could be anything else. Now, what with 750 to 800 million internet users, 600 to 650 million smartphone users, 15, 16 billion transactions on UPI, I think payments is prevalent as we speak as far as embedded finance is concerned. We are a payment solution provider, and we have seen this space growing substantially over the last at least 8 years, if not more. And we are seeing different and path-breaking use cases of how payments is now being used in various journeys, consumer journeys, as we've seen over the years. Some of the examples, like one of them I gave some time back in transit. Some of the other examples are, how the e-wallets have shaped up over some time. Some regulations have already taken place and maybe have put them on back foot. But I think one of the strongest use case of embedded payments is e-wallets. We've seen multiple checkout options when you do an e-commerce shopping, etc. I think it comes out to the fore when you're making the payment without any friction. Now, there are channels there where you don't have to even enter your OTP or a CVV, so to say. So it's trying to become as frictionless as possible, as seamless as possible. And I think it is going to stay. We're going to see the embedded payments especially grow from here, become even larger, become even embedded as multiple use cases and journeys come in. Some of the other interesting use cases that maybe the NPCI is coming up with is something called an ANPR. So up till now we were paying transit toll using a FASTag. Going forward, it will be your number plate that the scanner recognizes and debits your account rather than having a different FASTag account, specifically for having this payment made. So all of this now is becoming much more seamless, and I think that's where our effort is also to become more frictionless, seamless, and more user-friendly, so to say, to everybody in payments.
Thank you. And now I was thinking, because my speakers have spoken a lot about seamless, frictionless, and until recently I was based in Hawaii. If I was to just compare notes for the US market to India, one of the telecom providers has to issue me has to give me a refund, and they said the best bet for them would be to issue me a check. And I was thinking to myself, which world are we living in? Are you kidding me? You're going to send me a check over? So, of course, India has leapfrogged, right? But if I were to ask you, and if you could just pick one thing that has been the real winner in terms of the disruption, whether it was the regulator, the infrastructure, or just the appetite for people to take that risk and keep moving, like Mr. Modi says about Startup India, Digital India, what is it? If you could just pinpoint one thing that has helped India to be where it is right now. I'm looking at you, Aditya.
Well, actually, I'll try and combine an answer which sort of answers your first question, and it just struck me right now. And I apologize if I'm going to take a few names which is only illustrative, not a comment on anybody. My favorite payment instrument currently is WhatsApp, and I'll give you a simple reason for that. I'm in Gurgaon, and the boozers in the house will know that sometimes when you often have to ping Discovery or Lake Forest, you can send a message over WhatsApp to the guy to deliver the booze. And he says, WhatsApp pe payment bhej dena. So it's the most effective use case that I've ever found to make life easy for me for every Friday evening when you're getting together with friends. So, and if you're a bad planner as far as parties go, you inevitably run out of, your bar lightens up, and you've got to ask for a replenishment. I think that's one area where my life has actually become easy. You don't have to send somebody out to fetch it; it gets delivered, and you make a payment. But having said which, I think it's also, there's a plethora of frenzied experimentation happening over there. Clearly, UPI has opened up the rails for multiple things. You've got TPAPs, which have led the growth in these payments. Banks have sort of been laggards, but they're getting onto those platforms. I think everybody's recognizing the need of offering this to the customer, because the customers are the demand, the pull is sort of increased substantially and undeniably. The value of these payments also then translates into the data and footprint that you're able to accumulate on that. And I think there have been some, and people have begun to use this data also, for creating products and services. One outcome of this has been, as a small finance bank, we just recently heard from RBI opening up the credit line on UPI for small finance banks. This was open to the universal banks, not to us. Clearly, it is seen as a way of topping up the payment experience with that of small ticket size credit that helps, at least that clearly at the first instance seems to suggest that it can be of value to a few segments, customer segments where credit becomes difficult to be delivered. If you can ease the budgetary constraint for, let's say, in the microfinance segment or in the emerging affluent segment, I think these rails are only are going to facilitate that at a faster pace. So, the great thing is that we've got the ecosystem and the infrastructure that is very supportive. I think we've got the regulatory environment that's stable and that is encouraging. So all the building blocks are coming together fairly well, and I think as we move forward, you'll only see the explosion of these products and services using these rails grow manyfold. I think if you were to sort of look at the 5 years back, I think there were some skeptics, there were some starters, but today people want to leapfrog onto this ecosystem, including banks like us. We want to sort of make sure that this is a standard pack that we put out when we talk about our mobile services or bank or internet banking or anything else. These rails should be present. Customers are going to reject you if you're not going to sort of meet these standards at least. At the very least.
That's interesting that you mentioned the example of WhatsApp, because for me, essentially WhatsApp would be a best way to share the screenshot of my payment. Perhaps I'm using a UPI or something. So I have seldom used WhatsApp, and that's one of the things I talk about in the book as well, that the Western market is so particular about the privacy that they stay on to what they're using, and they would never leave that ecosystem so much. And WhatsApp, and coming from the Facebook example, the parent company, Facebook is one app, and the Messenger is another, right? And Instagram is another app. So here we talk about super apps, one-stop solution, but we haven't seen that happening so much. But that's a different point. Yeah, Aiyappa, what do you think has been the reason? And you are actually in the hub of where the action is, Bangalore.
See, if we were to talk about the regulator and how involved they are, though RBI has been known in the recent past to be in the forefront of keeping your financial institutions on their toes, but RBI is also one of the most tech advanced regulator in the world, right? I mean, look at RBI Edge, look at the ULI platform. The initiatives that the RBI is coming out with is...
Maybe you can talk about ULI in a brief sentence or two, because people may not know what is ULI, right?
In this space, I'd be surprised. But
okay. I mean, right. I had that question as well. Everyone is just learning. That's why I thought if you could.
Okay. So the unified lending interface that the RBI Edge introduced is about introducing alternative data sources for the lending platform, right? And people can now come on board and bring about their services and consume different types of data sets. So for example, I also come from an agriculture background, right? How would you underwrite me to give me a loan? I don't have an income, right, in the sense of a salary or things like that. But the way the ULI works is that it also has rails into my land records. It has now that is comparable to, or rather you can now, from my land records, get data with satellite records of what kind of crops are growing there, what is the output, what could potentially be my annual income basis, what is the prevailing rates in the market for that crop. And hence now you're able to consume so much more data and underwrite us or any citizen so much better, right? You add on banking services, and we are happy to say that Anumati is one of the first account aggregators to go live on the ULI, right? And combine that with banking services, and you have now pretty much a 360-degree view of any citizen and how his finances look. And so you can underwrite them so much better with now having access to assets and all of these other things. So these are some of these great initiatives that RBI has been coming out with that takes it so much further away than what you would possibly see outside of India, right? And it's been great from that point of view. So,
I mean, I know probably you will continue the same question, so I said might as well save time. So, I was talking to the team here at lunch, and I said, and someone asked me, how do you feel coming back to India, right? And it was quite a interesting thing for me, because I've lived out of India for pretty long, and it happened to be that I ended up, in my previous role, I ended up coming to India for GFF, and GFF is a global fintech festival in India, and I saw the buzz, I saw what was going on. It was an absolute eye opener for me. Although I've always been in the tech space and I've always been in the banking and finance space, it was amazing the kind of stuff that was going. And then I started reading a lot about it. I started reading about the India stack, JAM, as we were talking about, and so on. And it's just mind-blowing what RBI, the combination of the RBI, the government, the Ministry of Finance, the regulators, and of course the ecosystem, the banks themselves, the FIs, all coming together to really do this. And the larger picture being financial inclusion, SME credit, payment optimization across all channels, and so on and so forth. So I think it's all like he was saying, the story is all coming together now. And I was also ruining the fact that why didn't I come to India earlier? Yeah, I could have done a little more. But having said that, that's really been an eye opener for me, and I think it's a personal story which I thought a fellow Singaporean will understand.
That's interesting. And I'm glad you mentioned about coming back and realizing how progressive India is in that sense. And I'm not sure if there are any regulators, because we are going all gung-ho about the regulators. This is the only panel we have nothing negative to say about our regulators. That's very interesting. That is right. It's a classified information then, yes. So over to the sexy business, yeah.
Yeah, so I think you asked about US and India corridor, and interestingly, my own company is headquartered in the US. So I think I have a little context about what happens there and we are building in India. You asked about infrastructure, so I think Parag mentioned about JAM, Jandan, Aadhaar and mobile. So just to put some numbers in perspective, we have 900 million debit cards in circulation. Aadhaar, I think it's a global phenomena. Everybody knows what it did, not only for the banking setup, but even when COVID happened. I think Aadhaar was singularly responsible for making sure that the benefits reached people through an identified mode, right? In the US, people were still using paper chits for vaccination, for example. And mobile, I think, is peerless, right? I mean, we have the cheapest data in the world. We have more than 600 million smartphones in circulation. And what it does is that, I think, as Ranjeet talked about payments, it allows people to access payments on the fly. Embedded finance is available to you. It becomes very seamless because you are accessing mobile on cheap internet rates across the country. We have India Stack. Somebody talked about ULI. I think Aiyappa talked about ULI. So there's a lot of payments, finance, availability, which is very easy. And on top of that, you're becoming a digital economy where travel, education, healthcare, food, groceries, apparels, everything is today digitized. So I think we are in a very unique space where the demographic profile, 65% of India is under 35 years of age. You have a peerless infrastructure layer on top of it. Last decade, I think, has been truly transformational in terms of decision-making at the center. And to be able to drive these significant initiatives in a country of our magnitude and size, right? I think that is definitely laudable. And I'm not saying it just because I'm saying it in this forum. And I think we all are now accruing benefits of what has happened, and the onus is on the industry and people like us who are building, trying to make a difference in the lives of people. So, as is famously said, while building a company, make something people want and people love. So I think we as India have been able to build something which now we all are loving, because we love using all these things. We may not have realized this, but I think it has changed the way we are living. And it has a compounding impact on the efficiencies of India. And I think that will make us grow much faster as compared to what we could have. So I think this separates us from the US, because probably we are hungrier right now. And that hunger has translated into infrastructure layer, execution bias of people, and look at the startup community. I think we were chatting offline as some of these events and events like GFF, there's a very high degree of intensity which people are able to, see. Like, I think Parag saw that, right? Firsthand is what he mentioned. So I think all of this is coming together just at the right time and augurs extremely well for us, all of us.
No, I mean, he's absolutely right. I mean, I've done an entire Delhi trip yesterday and today without carrying my wallet. I actually forgot my wallet back home and no cash. I've done a complete cashless journey, right? Completely on UPI. Yeah. So people don't understand how convenient it is. Yeah.
So the person who does offline to online, over to you.
Yeah, so I think they covered that the forward-looking regulator that we have. Nothing negative to say again. The entire infrastructure that is there, the startup revolution, the entire ecosystem coming together, making it favorable, for embedded finance to grow and thrive. I think what has worked, according to me, for us, and it is working again, is the kind of adoption that we as Indians, you and I, show. I think we are very, very keen to latch on to something new that has come and try it on. Talk about illiteracy, talk about below poverty line, talk about not wise enough to be able to share their individual personal data, or PII as we call. Despite all of this, the adoption by the Indians have been phenomenal. And I think this is what is making everything come together, work, the growing, the thriving startup fraternity, the number of transactions that are phenomenally growing in terms of payment space. Every other industry which is using fintech or fintech-led journey into their ecosystem, I think is growing phenomenally because we as Indians are very, very open to newer ideas, newer thought processes, newer journeys, and I think this is what has worked for us and will continue to work.
Wow, on that optimistic note, I must tell you, when we were having the panel huddle, my co-panelists had huge doubt on me whether I would be able to do a good job of it or not. I really mean it. And whether I can stay on time. I think I did well, if my watch is telling me correct. And now I'm going to open the floor for questions. I see some women sitting here, so I'm going to be utterly biased and ask them to ask questions first and drill the men here. And then we'll open the floor for the largest crowd in the room, the men. And here's the person who's going to give you the mic. So, ladies, any questions? I'll come to you, sir. Just in a minute. I see a lady sitting here.
Hi. So my question is for Aiyappa. I would like to know, so I was in that Sahmati which happened a few months back. I wanted to... Sahmati is another event for the...
Sahmati is the Association of Account Aggregators.
Yeah. It's an ecosystem event for account aggregators. Okay. And obviously Perfios and Anumati was a big part of it. I would like to know how's the success rate of KYC processes that you are seeing in this account aggregation?
Okay.
Because we are also trying to play a role in this ecosystem. I would like to know from your point of view.
Who's we?
ISG. Sorry, I represent ISG.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
In Solutions Global.
See, the account aggregator framework, right, is pretty much where UPI was in 2016. We're very, very nascent, right? While everybody has high hopes that we will scale, tech obviously has to play a big role, right? And that means all players in the ecosystem have to come up and reach that point where we can service customers, like everybody's saying, seamlessly, right? Today, on an average, if I was to combine both the public sector banks and the private sector banks, we're looking at somewhere around 75 to 80% success rates. What are some of the things that are on the table for debate is the quality of data that's coming in. That it's a huge debate. It's also the uptime of some of the FIPs and things like that. But Sahmati has enough initiatives that are on the table that are up for approval with either the regulator or or the other banking section to introduce interoperability the way it was meant to be, right? And if the Sahmati net, or whenever the Sahmati net gets implemented, it should resolve all these problems, right? Banks have committed that within a reasonable timeline, they will fix all required infrastructure to support the AA ecosystem. The Indian Banking Association or even Department of Finance are giving complete support. So it's a matter of time. Like I said, we are very, very nascent. We've been live for 2.5 years. So to expect that kind of a churn is huge. I mean, Sahmati today records about 100 million consents every month. Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. So we have long ways to go, but we're getting there.
Thanks for the question. Thanks, Aiyappa. The gentleman there, can we pass on the mic to him, please? Thank you for waiting, sir. Yes, I'm coming on to you as well, sir, right after.
Yeah.
If you could also introduce yourself, your name and where do you work? Thank you.
I work with Aditya in...
Oh, your colleague. So this question is planted then, not counted. Sorry, cut it.
The question I had is, the data privacy bill requires masking of PII data. Whereas in the fintech business, the whole way we process transactions is by scrubbing the data against various databases provided by fintech to whitelist it, whether credit, identity, fraud. So once you mask the data, which is one regulation, the other is whitelisting the data, which is the other regulations. How do you make it work now that the data will be masked, it's no longer accessible for that STP scrubbing, which was possible till now?
This seems more like a Parag question, but how you guys handle data at the back end of Veefin.
Did you have a speaker in mind who you wanted to address this question?
I'm guessing it came to me, but...
Oh, okay.
But see, with regards to how you mask the data, if you talk to tech service providers who actually work on the data, they've been doing it forever, right? And they've been managing it through a good coding system of trying to say that, okay, fine, I've masked the PII, but I know who this is referring to. So from that point of view, I think your bank statement analysis tools have been managing this brilliantly for a very long time in the underwriting space. But I have a different point of view when you come to data privacy and how the DPDP is acting and things like that, right? So while we are constantly talking about seamless journeys and things like that, at our level, we do believe that some friction is important, right? It allows a customer to take a step back and analyze exactly what he's doing, while agreeing to everything that is happening in that journey. Otherwise, it's just a whole set of click, 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 and you're done. Customer barely is ever reading anything. So when you give him that extra step of entering an OTP and things like that, and then you're putting that consent artifact in front of him, he's now aware that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how it's going to happen, and this is why they're taking my data, and all of that now becomes transparent. But yes, at the back end, it will be masked, and it would identifiers will happen and things like that.
Maybe just to add, so in payments, we don't store data. It has been now regulated. Okay, so there are no card informations, there are no UPI informations that we store. It's on the fly. It's in memory. Gets scrubbed out as soon as the transaction is finished, and nothing is stored. As far as PII is concerned, in payments, yes, we do store that, and there's an elaborate guideline over it. And now it is getting drafted in DPDP. So DPDP is still evolving. We're still getting multiple guidelines coming in, after the act has been passed. And I'm pretty sure everybody is now kind of grappling with what could be done with DPDP. We are also, in the same boat. But like I said, there are encryption mechanisms which are currently also present in terms of sharing the PII data, if at all that is necessary. So I think that's pretty covered as of this point in time.
Thank you. To the gentleman there.
Hi, my name is Himanshu Sasteva. I'm from Global Payments. It's, I think, one of the largest payment solution provider in the world. Coming to my question, traditional financial institutions like banks or non-banking companies, they invest heavily in security and making sure like regulatory compliances are met, and they're audited. But when say a non-related business or any business start providing any financial solution or financial product, they may not have resources, or they may not be willing to invest so heavily. So doesn't it expose like consumers to say a higher risk, both the consumers and the organizations? Like we've seen, like RBI has gone very hard, even on well-known names in the Indian industry, because of not meeting certain compliance requirements. But if any business or every business starts coming with financial products, won't it like create say a higher risk and probably even threaten the fabric of financial ecosystem?
Maybe I can take this question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, no, I think it's a very good question, and why I said I could take this question is because we operate as a lending service provider, loan service provider. We are a fairly young startup, but we work with the biggest of banks in the country. So HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank are lending partners on SaveIN. Now, when you stitch such partnerships in a consumer-facing domain, today the law of the land requires you to conform to the highest degree of customer data security measures, and these banking institutions, on behalf of RBI, under the DLG, the Digital Lending Guidelines, is expressly clear that the way you deal with customer data, what customer data you obtain, for what purpose you obtain, how much of that do you store, what can you do to cross-sell on that data, everything is very clearly defined, which I think solves for 90% of the problem. Because once something is clearly defined, then it is up to the institution concerned or the entity concerned to ensure that you go that extra mile and do what is required. Otherwise, you will be shut down. Because the biggest of financial institutions have been shut down. So I think the regulatory ecosystem that we have developed, especially over the last 2 to 3 years, has articulated the requirements of any organization which wants to operate in the embedded ecosystem extremely clearly. And it has also been demonstrated by the regulator that if you are found wanting in terms of conforming to those requirements, you will be shut down. So I think that makes it expressly clear, and I believe very comfortable for the end user, that there is express evidence that these organizations which are authorized to operate on behalf of lending institutions, which we call as regulated entities, are conforming to certain structures which are in the favor of the customer and are blessed by the law of the land. So I think that should give comfort to people, and I think this is a space which is evolving rapidly. Now with DPDP, there will be other requirements that organizations which are operating in this space will have to conform to, and all of these are customer-centric.
And maybe just to add, so when businesses embed finance, it does not mean they have to build financial services themselves. They use enablers who are anyway, like you said, regulated entities. So the regulations pertaining to data security of a customer is anywhere the responsibility of the financial services provider who is getting embedded into a non-financial services provider business. And therefore, to that extent, it is well covered. Obviously, a lot of things have to be done, and a lot of information gets shared between these two entities, and how do we protect the data security eventually of a customer who's getting onboarded on both the platforms is something which probably DPDP covers or may cover well in future. But there are enough and more laid guidelines already present, especially for both these segments to work together.
Sorry, I'll just expand on that. So, for example, let's say when they or any fintech embeds a financial service, and you have to collect data. Today, the way it's working is most of the financial institutions actually use an account aggregator for this purpose, right? That role of getting consent and getting the data is now managed by the account aggregator in the fintech process. Right? So in that journey itself, an account aggregator gets embedded, and what you would be happy to know is that the data flows only to the regulated entity. So RBI has made it quite strict from that point of view, and the DLG also covers it is that a non-regulated entity actually cannot underwrite you. They cannot look at your raw data and analyze it. It all has to flow to the regulated entity, and only an analyzed report may be shared with the fintech or the non-banking partner. Right.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? Because I see it's pretty much house full. So if you have any questions, this is your last call before we wrap up the session, because one of the panelists has a flight to catch. Okay, no more questions. So I think we did justice to transforming every business into fintech business. We had panelists from all walks of life, and before I let them go, I would ask them a quick rapid fire. And there's just one word, guys. I know it's very hard to keep you to one word. If there's just one word in which you can describe the kind of disruption or the revolution that you see in the embedded finance space in 2025. I'm going to start with you. You volunteer anyway, so. Quick, this is rapid fire. You can't take so much time.
Phenomenal.
Disruptive.
Scalable.
Evolving.
Creative.
Creative, that's right. So we have covered all the bases here. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. And a big hand of applause for our panelists here. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you for the next panel. Thank you. And I hope your next espresso is not going to be as interesting as my panelist here. Thank you, and safe travels.